I'm sorry to be the one to tell you guys this. You cannot have it all. And I was like, that's the last thing that I want to hear. I want to hear that I can have it all. I want to hear that my kids will have tons of quality time with me and know that I love them and think I'm the best. And my spouse and I will get to go on lots of dates and travel together and see the world. And I'm going to make all this money and be a high-powered executive and do all the things. Like, I want it all. And you can't. Now, you can have those things and juggle them and make them work, but there is no perfect balance of like never giving up one thing for something else. It's just not realistic. And so what happens is when we think we're going to have balance, we expect this perfection, this control, and life is unpredictable, right? It's like trying to juggle water. You can't hold it steady. It's going to leak through your fingers, but you can kind of flow with water. You could float down a river. You can let it kind of take you where it needs to go, but you've got to be flexible and you've got to have this path. So in order to do this well, in order to integrate our lives better, we have to start by redefining success. Welcome back to this episode of Secrets of the Career Game. So many people are trying to navigate a corporate world that is laden with secrets, cleverly hidden, and unspoken rules to a game that most employees don't even know that they're playing. On this podcast, we try to give you a peek behind the curtains and some tips and tricks to ultimately make you successful in your career and help you progress a little bit faster. We have all been sold this idea of balance, as if there's a perfectly weighted scale between career, family, self-care, hobbies, friendships. But what if that's the wrong game entirely? Because when we think of our lives, it is very rare, if ever, that it all feels perfectly balanced, right? That's why today we're going to be jumping in and talking about the myth of work-life balance, because I don't believe it exists. And in fact, the former CEO of PepsiCo has done multiple interviews where she talks about all of the reasons why balance no longer exists in the workplace. And we'll talk instead about integration and how integrating the different areas of your life together is ultimately going to make it more successful. There are plenty of times as a business owner, as a corporate leader, as a manager, as a mom, as a wife, as someone who's trying to go to the gym regularly, that I do not feel like I am balancing on all fronts, right? When I got married, the pastor who performed my wedding ceremony talked about balance in a marriage and said that when you get married, you expect that all the time, everything is going to be 50-50. You're going to give 50, they're going to give 50, everything's going to be whole. But what actually happens is, imagine you have 2 mugs of water, and at the start, they're both filled 50%. But there are some times where this person is pouring their whole cup into this person is pouring it back. There are some times where we're level. There's sometimes where person A is slightly higher than person B, or person B is slightly higher than person A, but you're all in it together. And I apply that all the time to my marriage. There are times where my husband is wonderfully supportive and allows me to do a lot of different things: run a podcast, write a book, travel for speaking engagements, run a business, all while having a corporate job and 2 young kids. And there are other times where that gets flipped on its head and I need to be there for him, where he's traveling for work or he is in golf tournaments where he needs that additional time. And so it's never a perfect balance. It is never 50-50. It's just not sustainable. And the same is true of not just within our marriage, but in your broader life, which is there are times where work is going to take more time. I just went through budget season. For any of you guys in finance or who are budget adjacent, it sucks. Like September, October is hard because it is budget season, right? It requires a lot more time and a lot more mental investment. On the flip side, there are times and seasons where my corporate job may be slower, more people are on vacation, there's a large offsite with many team members and there's less going on, and I have more time to hit the gym, be present with my kids, etc. So your life is never going to personally balance, and even if it is personally balanced, it's not going to stay that way, right? At best, you are juggling different things, and some things are up in the air while you're catching other things, and vice versa, right? So what if instead of trying to balance everything, what if instead of this work-life balance myth, we focused on integration, which is building a life where every part of your life operates in harmony rather than in competition with one another. So the modern definition of this work-life balance has really created almost this unrealistic toxic effect on the corporate world. I hear it a lot, especially when we talk about remote work. People will say, oh, I have such better work-life balance when I work remote because I can do my laundry while I'm on calls, or I can, go for a walk or work out in between when I don't have meetings. And we think that this gives us more balance, but what it really does is it just bleeds all of these things together. And then if you are in an office, there's more separation. Frankly, there are benefits to being back in office. I'm not saying I'm an advocate, just saying there are benefits where you do have separation. You're at work when you're at work and you're not at work when you're home. But we have this concept that work-life balance means I have plenty of time to do everything that I would love to do in my personal time and personal life. I have plenty of money to do all those things in my personal life, and I get to work when I want to on the things that I want to. And what this ultimately leads to is either major burnout because the expectations that we have of how work is going to work or how much time we should have for other activities ends up inaccurate. And then we're burnt out mentally and emotionally with the things that we have to do. Or we end up in this hustle culture idea of like, well, I'm just going to work longer hours. I need this promotion. I need this title. And once I hit that level, then I will have time to do all the things I want, or I will have money to do all the things I want. And if you've tuned in with some of my mini episodes that we've been talking through in the previous weeks, I actually talked about this fallacy that like by working more and getting more senior, you're going to get more time back. It like generally does not work that way. And so instead, we feel like we should be able to have it all. And then when we can't, we really struggle and we flounder. Earlier on in my career, when I was working for a different bank, there was this women's leadership conference. And I remember one of my executives was like, hey, you should come with me. We'll sit at the same table. And you're like, great, wonderful networking opportunity. So I go to this women's conference, and it was an executive from a very famous TV channel who had run very famous TV shows. And she was the keynote speaker. And I remember the first thing she said when she stood up to the podium was, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you guys this, you cannot have it all. And I was like, that's the last thing that I want to hear, right? I want to hear that I can have it all. I want to hear that my kids will have tons of quality time with me and know that I love them and think I'm the best. And my spouse and I will get to go on lots of dates and travel together and see the world. And I'm going to make all this money and be a high-powered executive and do all the things. Like I want it all. And you can't. Now, you can have those things and juggle them and make them work. But there is no perfect balance of like never giving up one thing for something else. It's just not realistic. And so what happens is when we think we're going to have balance, we expect this perfection, this control. And I don't know if you've ever tried to control anything in your life, but I have, and I never control it well. And life is unpredictable, right? It's like trying to juggle water. You can't hold it steady. It's going to leak through your fingers, but you can kind of flow with water. You could float down a river. You can let it kind of take you where it needs to go, but you've got to be flexible and you've got to have this path. So in order to do this well, in order to integrate our lives better, we have to start by redefining success. And we need to do that through integration. So integration is blending your career goals with your personal values and relationships. This means the things are cohesive, not contrarian. And this, I think, is harder in a corporate setting than when you are an entrepreneur. I'm going to go ahead and put that out there. It's not impossible. It's not that you can't do it. It's just like slightly more challenging. But step one is you have to ensure that the business you're in is aligned with your values. Okay. Now, this can mean a lot of different things. If you are an entrepreneur like myself, this means that my schedule, my priorities, my urgency are aligned with the values I have in the rest of my life, like being able to work out regularly, being able to be present for my kids' soccer games and attending their school functions. I'm building my business around those things, not contrary to those things. Now, if you work a corporate job, this means you have to have a good company culture and a good relationship with your boss where your values are aligned. Now, in my corporate job, I have a boss who really prioritizes family. They take family trips together. He spends a lot of time with his wife. And so it's much easier for me if I need to take time off to go to a kid's activity, or if I'm traveling with my husband, or if we have a date night. My boss is super flexible around those things because they're also a priority to him. And our company culture is one that allows for that flexibility generally. There are always some exceptions. Again, there's no perfect balance. But on the whole, we have alliance in what's important to us. Work from home is also really important to me. Neither my boss nor myself live in a central location for our company. Makes it a lot easier to get remote work approved, right? So you have to have alignment between your business, your work, what you're doing, and what's really important to you. I have a client right now who what's really important to them is moving overseas. They want to move to a new country. They have all of these goals in this new country of things they're going to do, and they just feel like that fits their lifestyle better. So we're making a trade-off with some business and promotion and career progression in favor of moving countries, because that is more aligned with their values and where they're going. These are the kinds of trade-offs that you do have agency to change in your career. Because I know that's going to be the first comment on this video is, well, I don't have the power to work remote. My boss would never let me. Or I don't have the power to change countries because my company doesn't allow that. Or, well, yeah, my boss is toxic and the company culture is toxic, but the job market sucks. Like, you have more agency than you think. And this is why, as a quick side note, quiet cracking is the new trend in careers. And I'm so sorry for this, you guys. But quiet cracking is basically you stay in a job you know is toxic because the job market is too scary and too unstable for you to leave, and you just burn out. And that sucks, right? I don't want that for you. You have more agency than you think, whether that's to start your own business, whether that's to change companies, whether that's to change countries, whether that's to find a remote job. You have options, but you have to take action. They're not going to happen to you. And as you think about what's really important to you, then you can think about how do you integrate those times together, right? So I was listening to a video from the PepsiCo CEO this morning, actually, and I'm going to do a short about this separately on the channel. You can check it out. But she talks about how there's this time she's supposed to bake homemade cookies for her child's school. And her kid calls her an hour before she's supposed to be there and is like, hey, just making sure you've got the cookies. You're going to be there. And she's like, what are you talking about? Because in true child fashion, the child had not said anything to her. And even if she had, the CEO does not have time to bake homemade cookies on a Tuesday morning to take them to her kid's school. It's just not feasible. So she calls down to the cafeteria at her corporate building and is like, hey guys, I need chocolate chip cookies and I need them in aluminum foil so that they look like I made them, and I need to take them to my kid's school. And that is more of an opportunity to integrate, to make the things work together than it is trying to balance. She didn't log off early the day before and go home and bake for 6 hours in order to have cookies ready the next morning. She found what worked for her to integrate the two pieces of her lives together. And once you figure out how you can do this, it's going to eliminate a lot of guilt, right? Especially for the parents who are listening to this. I get it. I feel so much mom guilt for my kids. I was sharing on a different episode today how often my kids go to their teacher and say, well, my mom works a lot. Like every parent teacher conference, their teachers are like, yeah, so-and-so said that you really work a lot. I'm like, yeah, I do. And on one hand, I'm really thankful that they see that in me, that they're building good work ethic, that they know how important it is to show up for themselves and to build something and to work hard. But on the other side, I also want them to say things like, oh, my mom is so nice and my mom's a good cook and my mom loves to play soccer with me. Like, I want those types of comments too, right? But it requires integration. And this is where I think parents have a hard time is we don't integrate. We pick two really opposing things and then we expect to be able to force them to work together. The last example I'll use on this is seniority, right? If you want to be a CEO, you are going to have less time for your family. Sorry, that's the truth. Now, maybe you're willing to make that trade-off because on the other hand, then your spouse can stay home and they can spend time with the kids and we feel like that's an okay trade-off, right? Like, I'm not judging you. I'm just saying there are certain moves in your career that taking pull you further from your family. There are changes in your career, in your company that pull you further from what's going on or from your hobbies or from your friends. You have to make those decisions intentionally. Don't expect to sign up for a bunch of contrary things and they're all just going to fit in your schedule perfectly. I want you to take one major goal that you have, whether that is a promotion, whether that is starting a business, whether that is building content creation, whether that is being more active with your kids, whether that is learning to cook sourdough. Pick a goal, major goal, and ask, how can you pursue this in a way that adds to your life instead of taking away from it, right? Now, in order to do this, you have to have mapped out your values already. You have to know what's important to you. So if you don't already know what's important to you, I did an episode a few weeks ago about your future self identity and about how to map out your future self cheat sheet that will tell you, what hobbies you need to have, what's your lifestyle like, who are you, what words describe you. Go do that if you haven't done that. But then if you're going to take on new things, new promotions, new roles, new company, new country, new hobby, how do you do that in a way that adds to that vision of yourself, right? Recently, I've gotten back into cooking and kind of taken a break off because I love sweets and nobody in my family eats sweets. And I hate to bake a lot of sweets and then I'm the only person who eats them. But I'm getting back into it because it's a love relationship for me ever since high school. And so I'm getting back into baking. But baking is time, it's money, it's effort. And so, how am I doing this in a way that adds to my life? Like, my daughter's helping me, my husband's helping me. They're now part of that activity, right? And so, you have to figure out what are the ways you can do it that's going to add to what you're trying to accomplish instead of fight contrarian to it, right? There are definitely times where I have clients who leave their dream jobs to do something different that's ultimately better for them. Right. I had a client last year. I think I've referenced her on the podcast before because it's just one of my favorite examples. She worked with me for years, high performer, high achieving, on track for many promotions, managed a team, doing really well, quits her dream job to open a macaron shop. I love this for her. I do. Okay. It's a better fit for her life. Now it's challenging in different ways. You're starting a business, you've got to get licensure when you're in the food industry. She's trying to find space. Like there's other things that you deal with, but it's a better alignment for her values and for what she wants to do and how she wants to be present for her family and her community and what she wants to build and all of those things, right? Same is true for me building Career Coach. Running Career Coach is such a passion for me that whether I had a full-time corporate job or not, I'm going to be coaching. Whether I needed money or not, I'm really passionate about what I do. It fills a part of my soul. And so you have that better integration, right? Because just like in any strategy, whether that's a career strategy, whether that's your personalized strategy, integration teaches you how to do things effectively, right? At work, you can't run a strategy in isolation and you can't pick two opposing strategies and hope it's all going to work out. It all has to come together. Ultimately, what I hope you guys take away from this whole conversation today is that balance, this idea of balancing demands some level of perfection, right? We think if I'm balancing my home life and my work life, my kids are getting the very best of me and my work is getting the very best of me. We expect this level of perfection from ourselves that is really hard. Whereas integrating these things together allows us to evolve, to grow, to make trade-offs on a more regular basis and give ourselves a little bit of grace. I've given many examples today of clients, of myself. I think there are times when I miss things for work, right? There are times when I can't take my kids to practice because I have to work long hours, or I have a client who's going through something and I'm on vacation taking a call in my hotel room because this client really needs support. There are always trade-offs. And if you're expecting that you're going to do everything exactly the right way, exactly at the right time for everybody, you are going to find yourself sorely disappointed. There are many ways to organize your life, to organize your time. I've done time management episodes. I've done future state visions episodes. I've talked about, having intentional time built into your schedule to decompress. I've talked about hobbies. But some of this is just going to come down to mindset. If you are expecting that you're going to be perfect at everything and balance everything perfectly, you're setting yourself up for failure, right? It's the same at work. I tell my boss all the time, hey, I can do anything you want, but I can't do everything you want. So what's the most important and what drops? You have to apply that same logic to your life. You can do everything well if it's the only thing you're doing, but you can't do everything well at once. And so how do you pick what's the most important to you? For me, my family will always be the most important. I have turned down jobs. I turned down a CFO ship in my late 20s because it didn't align with where I was at in my family life. I have turned down roles in different countries and roles in different cities that would have been super high paying, super great opportunities because it didn't align with my family and where we were going, right? They are my priority. You have to figure out what your priorities are. If your career is your priority, then you need to be setting aside time, nights, and weekends to work on personal development, to work on building your financial health, to work on upskilling in your area and industry. Okay. If your career is your number one focus, make it your number one focus. You also have to have something to balance that, because your whole identity cannot be your job, because these companies, they be yahoos. They just be letting you go for no reason. Okay. But you have to build on the goals that you have, and you have to integrate them with your life. All right. Don't pick two things. I'll give one more example here. One more example. Right. When my husband was growing up, his dad was offered a really great job in a different state. And he took that job and he worked from a different state for a couple of years and flew home often, was still present, still made it to his baseball games, was still very active. That's not what I'm implying, but I'm just saying made a strategic choice to live in a different state. Okay. If he had expected at that time that he was going to take this position and be home for every single milestone that his kids were having, that's not reasonable. You're giving up one thing for another. Now, that's okay if it's strategic, if it's intentional, if you meant to do it, right? Figure out what's going to integrate and what's not going to integrate. And then last thing I'll say on this is I did have a client on a podcast episode that's coming out soon where she talks about having space, like intentional space in your schedule for nothingness. And for those of us who don't rest well, I find this such a revolutionary concept, because I'm always thinking about the next thing and the next goal and the next hobby and what am I going to do with all my time and how do I do these things? And she intentionally builds in space for nothing. And that for her means like not working on Fridays, which I think is awesome. And so you need to figure out, how do you intentionally pull these things together in a way that's going to work for your life. So your takeaways from today's episode are: 1, list out your values. What's important to you? What do you care about? What are you trying to integrate in the first place? I want you to stack rank those, most important to least important, okay? 2, figure out what things you are integrating, right? Assign goals. What are your goals? And how does that goal add to your life, add to the things you're integrating instead of taking away from it? If we find it's taking away from it, it is no, okay? And then lastly, I want you to define what the success metric for this looks like for you. So for me, the success metric is making my kids' events. Be amazed how hard it is to do that a lot of the time, right? One of my success metrics is, did I make my kids' baseball, soccer, acting, music, performances? Was I present for them? Did they know that I cared and I showed up? Right? That is a metric for me, because I think when you work a lot of long hours, it's really easy to lose sight of that. Okay. So what are your success metrics, right? Maybe your salary is one of them. Maybe a success metric is a certain level of seniority. Maybe it is, a fitness goal. Maybe it is being present for your kids. But if you start to get to the point where you have more than 3 success metrics, you're really going to have a hard time. Let's be honest. Okay. So hopefully you guys found this helpful. If you did, you should check out Chapter 8 in Secrets of the Career Game, my book, where I talk about designing a career that supports your life. It's really helpful for this exercise. That way you're creating a career that is in alignment with your goals, not the other way around, where we're always trying to squeeze things in. Go ahead, give us 5 stars if you like today's episode. If you have any questions for me, leave them below. Otherwise, we'll see you back here next week for another great episode.